Let's see how tough you really are, Cupcake, my older brother Kyle sneered, tossing a pair of worn sparring pads directly at my sneakers. The entire main mat at Vanguard Tactical went dead silent. Kyle had spent 3 months bragging about joining this elite invitation-only facility run by active special operations veterans. To him, I was just his quiet little sister who worked a soft desk job. He brought me here to humiliate me, to make me flinch in front of 40 elite fighters and finally prove he was the superior sibling. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I simply walked over to the front desk and slid my driver's license across to the lead instructor, a scarred combat veteran known as the Anvil. He glanced down at my ID, froze, and slowly looked up at the founder's plaque on the wall. When that terrifying man suddenly snapped to rigid attention and saluted me, my brother's arrogant smirk vanished completely. My name is Morgan Hayes. I am 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my older brother Kyle treated our lives like a one-sided competition. Kyle was 29, loud and built like an aggressive linebacker. He measured a person's worth strictly by the size of their biceps and how much noise they made when they entered a room. To him, I was merely the younger sister who worked a quiet, private logistics job behind a computer screen. He assumed I spent my entire adult life wrapped in bubble wrap, eating salads, and avoiding anything remotely strenuous. For years, Sunday family dinners were his personal stage. Every single accomplishment I ever had was immediately minimized, while his latest bench press personal record was celebrated like an Olympic victory. When I bought my own home, he loudly told our parents that real estate was easy for a woman who lived a boring, risk-free life. When I traveled abroad for work, he claimed I was just taking glorified vacations while he did real hard work back home. I never argued with him. I never raised my voice, nor did I feel the need to correct his endless assumptions. My mother always thought I was simply too shy to stand up to his towering ego, but the truth was much simpler. I did not need validation from someone whose idea of discipline ended at a mirror selfie. Then came the challenge. Kyle had spent the last 3 months bragging about his acceptance into Vanguard Tactical, an ultra-exclusive training facility. He decided that the best way to assert his superiority once and for all was to drag me along on a packed Saturday afternoon and publicly expose what he called my fragile, pampered weakness. The heavy steel doors of Vanguard Tactical slammed shut behind us, cutting off the quiet afternoon air and replacing it with the raw, rhythmic hum of high-level athletic combat. The facility was massive, built inside a converted industrial warehouse with matte black support beams and high-grip rubber flooring. The air smelled of chalk, leather, and conditioned sweat. Across the main training deck, active-duty servicemen, private security operators, and seasoned martial artists moved with sharp, mechanical precision. Heavy bags swung under relentless strikes, and over in the octagon rings, fighters drilled complex grappling transitions without uttering a single wasted breath. It was an elite environment designed to separate genuine capability from casual enthusiasm. Kyle immediately began puffing his chest out, adjusting his tight compression shirt and scanning the room to make sure people noticed him walking in. He threw a smug grin over his shoulder, clearly expecting me to freeze up at the sight of massive men slamming each other onto dense tatami mats. "Intimidating, isn't it?" he said, chuckling under his breath as he grabbed 2 oversized sparring pads from a storage rack and dropped them heavily at my sneakers. "Don't faint on me yet, Morgan. We haven't even started the basic conditioning trial." He strutted straight toward the main front counter, greeting a couple of other new recruits with loud, obnoxious fist bumps while deliberately positioning me as his helpless tag-along. Kyle grabbed an advanced liability waiver from the clipboard stand, tapped the signature line aggressively with a black pen and slid it toward me. "Sign it," he mocked, leaning close so nearby trainees could hear his voice clearly. "If you make it through the 5-minute endurance round without crying, I'll buy you lunch." I said nothing. I simply walked past him toward the check-in desk. Behind the reinforced check-in counter stood Master Sergeant Miller, a hulking, battle-hardened veteran whom everyone in the building simply called the Anvil. With a shaved head, a thick salt and pepper beard, and deep scars running down his forearm, he was not the type of man who smiled, indulged in small talk, or tolerated amateurs wasting his time. Kyle leaned over the counter with unearned familiarity, rapping his knuckles against the polished wood. "Hey Miller. Brought my little sister along today. Sign her up for the beginner trial so she can see what real work looks like. Try to take it easy on her." Miller didn't even look up at first. He kept his eyes locked on his digital logbook, his voice a gravelly monotone. Waiver needs government photo identification. Hand it over. Kyle gave me a patronizing pat on the shoulder, shaking his head with a smirk that practically screamed condescension. I ignored him, reached into my pocket and slid my state driver's license across the countertop. Miller reached out casually to pick it up, but the moment his gaze shifted to the text, his hands stopped completely. His eyes tracked across the letters. Morgan Hayes. The pencil in his thick fingers dropped with a sharp clatter onto the desk. He didn't blink. Slowly, deliberately, the veteran raised his eyes from the plastic card to my face, then glanced behind him at the gym's illuminated Hall of Honor plaque, where the names of foundational military tacticians were etched in brushed brass. The casual chatter around the reception area suddenly died down. Miller pushed back his heavy rolling chair, stood upright to his full 6'3" frame, and stepped out from behind the counter. The smirk on my brother's face began to falter. The room grew thick with a deafening silence. Every veteran and elite fighter within earshot paused their drills, turning toward the reception counter as Master Sergeant Miller closed the distance between us. Kyle let out a nervous, forced laugh, stepping sideways to interject. Look, Miller, if there's an issue with her ID, it's fine. Like I said, she's completely green. We don't have to waste time with the full registration. Shut your mouth, recruit, Miller snapped, not taking his eyes off me for a fraction of a second. The raw authority in his voice instantly cut Kyle off mid-sentence. Miller straightened his posture, his heels clicking together with textbook military precision. He brought his right hand up to his brow in a crisp, motionless salute. Captain Hayes, Miller said, his gravelly voice echoing across the quiet training floor. It is an honor to have you in our facility, ma'am. We had no idea you were in the state. Kyle's jaw dropped. He blinked rapidly, looking between the hulking head instructor and me as if we were speaking an alien language. Wait, Captain, what are you talking about? Miller, this is my sister Morgan. She works in corporate logistics. She's never touched a barbell in her life. Miller turned slowly, pinning my brother under a stare cold enough to freeze iron. Your sister served 6 years as Chief Hand-to-Hand Combat Instructor and Master Tactician for the Special Operations Defense Group. The advanced countergrappling syllabus we teach on these mats? She wrote the entire protocol before she retired to consult. Miller looked back at me, his rough expression softening with genuine reverence. The founders of Vanguard trained under your directives, Captain. You don't need a waiver here. This whole place exists because of your standard. 40 pairs of eyes shifted from the founder's wall directly onto me. Beside me, Kyle's face had drained of all color. Kyle stood frozen in the middle of the floor, his face shifting from stark pale to a deep, burning crimson. The humiliation of being corrected so publicly by the facility's toughest instructor was unbearable for him. Desperate to salvage his shattered pride, he forced another tight, defensive scoff. This has to be some kind of administrative mix-up, Kyle insisted, his voice cracking slightly under the weight of dozens of staring eyes. Paperwork gets mixed up all the time. If she's really the master tactician you claim, Miller, let's see a live demonstration. Right now. One controlled sparring round on the center mat. Miller turned an icy glare toward him, about to shut the challenge down instantly, but I held up a single hand. It's fine, Master Sergeant, I said quietly. I slipped off my running shoes, walked past the ring ropes, and stepped onto the dense canvas mat in my simple gray athletic gear. Kyle followed, aggressively wrapping his hands and setting himself into a rigid, heavy-footed boxing stance. He intended to use all 210 pounds of his frame to push me back and prove a point. Don't hold back, Morgan, he muttered under his breath, lunging forward with a heavy, telegraphed reach for my lead shoulder. I didn't step back. I didn't tense up. With minimal, fluid economy of motion, I pivoted half a step off the center line, letting his forward momentum carry him past me. My right hand caught the inside of his wrist while my left palm redirected his elbow. In less than 2 seconds, using pure leverage and center of gravity manipulation, I guided him cleanly down onto the mat, trapping his arm in a tight, harmless joint lock before he even realized he had lost his balance. He tried to thrash, but every ounce of pressure he exerted only locked him tighter against the canvas. Technique over ego, Kyle, I said softly near his ear. The entire gym erupted in sharp, thunderous applause as I smoothly released him and stepped back upright. Kyle sat on the edge of the blue perimeter bench, staring at the floor with his forearms resting heavily on his knees. His shoulders were slumped, the aggressive posture that had defined him for years completely dismantled in under 5 minutes. Around us, the atmosphere shifted entirely. The senior coaches and seasoned operators, men Kyle had spent weeks trying to impress with loud gym talk and heavy lifting numbers, walked right past him without a second glance. Instead, they formed a respectful semicircle near the edge of the mat, waiting for a chance to speak with me. "Captain Hayes," one of the tactical instructors said, extending a hand. "We still run your defensive counterflow drill every single Tuesday morning. It completely changed how we train our defensive fundamentals." "Thank you," I replied with a steady nod. "Good fundamentals keep people safe." I answered their brief technical questions about leverage distribution and recovery timing while Kyle sat 3 feet away, utterly invisible. He wasn't the star recruit, the dominant big brother, or the expert in the room. He was just a guy who had spent his life confusing loudness with capability. When the group finally dispersed back to their stations, Kyle slowly stood up, untying his hand wraps with trembling fingers. He looked at me, opening his mouth to formulate an excuse, to mention his grip slipping, the floor being slick, or anything that could preserve the illusion he had built. But as he looked into my eyes, he saw that there was no anger, no gloating, and no arrogance on my face. There was only calm, steady certainty. The words died in his throat. He lowered his head, grabbed his gym bag from the bench, and quietly walked toward the exit. The drive home was wrapped in a quiet so heavy you could hear the steady hum of the tires against the pavement. For nearly 40 minutes, Kyle kept both hands locked onto the steering wheel, his eyes fixed dead ahead. The relentless bravado, the unsolicited advice about life, the mocking commentary on my routine, all of it had completely evaporated. When we finally pulled up to the curb outside my house, he kept the engine running, staring down at the dashboard for a long time before he spoke. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" His voice was barely above a whisper, entirely stripped of its usual razor edge. "All those years, I talked down to you. I acted like you were fragile. Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" I unbuckled my seatbelt, resting my hand on the passenger door handle, and looked over at him. "Because real strength doesn't need an audience, Kyle," I said calmly. "When you truly know what you're capable of, you don't feel the need to shout it from the rooftops or tear other people down just to make yourself feel tall." He swallowed hard, nodding slowly as the weight of those words finally settled in. For the first time in 27 years, he wasn't looking at a competitor he needed to beat. He was looking at a sister he finally respected. "I'm sorry, Morgan," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, stepping out into the cool evening air. "True power never screams. It simply stands its ground."